Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central, and here's your host, Bob Hickey.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host. Thank you for taking a little bit of time, grabbing a cup of coffee, sit back. Join with me as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough the gem of Norfolk County. I'm here with my guest, once again, Joe Raulinaitis. How are you doing, sir?
Bob, it is great to be here. I can't think of a better place I'd want to be than here.
Really?
It's great.
Well, you and everybody else, we all welcome you. So, Joe, of course, is our Food and Drug Administration guru, but your official title is?
Public Affairs Specialist.
Okay, and you're out of the Worcester office.
Worcester Resident Post, which is really located in Boylston up 140, but that's the government. Yeah.
Okay.
Can't find us, can't catch us.
So we always love having you come in to share updates and what's new with the FDA. Here in Foxborough, we have our own Board of Health, and we have our own emergency preparedness group. We have CERT, we also have fantastic fire chief, police chief, and we have an entire infrastructure made up of volunteers and professionals to deal with crisis situations. However, we also have, in the broader context, much more going on than just our local response. And the topic of today's program is going to be emergency preparedness and emergency responses and the FDA's role in ensuring what?
Well, I think the best way to focus on this is in the concept of the war on terrorism. You know, Americans have busy lives and sometimes short interest and memory spans. We're still involved in dealing with terrorism. I mean, we see it on the news all the time. And you take that a step further to what the FDA's mission in this. And you really do need a historical perspective. You need to look back to 2001, the famous or infamous terror attacks on this country, which kicked off the war on terrorism.
Certainly.
And then you have to look at the Bioterrorism Act, which was signed into law in 2002.
So we had the Bioterrorism Act in 2000. Now, the 9/11 attacks and the murderous acts by the cowards on the World Trade Center and hijacking the airplanes used as missiles, that wasn't an FDA issue. But also, if we remember, post-Pentagon, post-Pennsylvania, post-New York, there were the arsenic?
Anthrax, was it
Anthrax,
not? It was, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was a huge concern about poisoning water supplies.
Food
and there's
water.
a lot of activity going on beyond the airplanes. So putting it in the context of the time, we all remember there were letters being mailed. The Quabbin Reservoir was under National Guard surveillance. The reservoir up on the Blue Hills Reservation was fenced in. And so a lot of different things were going on. So this is a fascinating topic, and we just have to bring ourselves back to the context of the times.
You're right, and the Wachusett Reservoir up in the Clinton area was also under National Guard protection. So, I mean, the federal government had to step up, and when the Bioterrorism Act came into focus, and even before that, we had to look at what the FDA did it best. And food protection or food safety and water safety is where we stand with a great deal of professional integrity and professionalism.
So water safety is under your purview?
Yes, water safety under the Bioterrorism Act, as well as drug safety as well. Mm-hmm. So when that act was signed into law, Robert, in 2002, they looked at the agencies who took care of food and took care of drug development and so forth, and said, this is where you stand when it comes to protecting all the Foxborough residents and all the residents from coast to coast. This is where you do your best work. So we had to step up and train our people and train industry in three areas: prevention, response, and recovery. I think before the show you and I were talking, and we agreed that what makes a nation great, or one of the factors that makes a nation great, besides wonderful shows like this,
thank you very much.
It's a little
I'll take it where I can get it.
We will. Is a safe food supply. Without a safe food supply, you can't develop art. You can't really develop communication. You're like a hand-to-mouth type of society. So a safe food supply does a lot for the quality of a nation. So we knew that with all our food industries and all the work we do in bringing things to the market, that we had to look at the food, the FDA did, from literally, Bob, from the farm to the table. Now that's a long road in reality, taking care of millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of food. So we had to look at that really close, and we had to put into effect programs that would get the feds, get the federal government, working with industry, working with the media, working with local town health programs and emergency response mechanisms, get us all on that proverbial same page. So that's what kicked off over 10 years ago. That's how we got it started.
Well, getting on the same page is a huge undertaking. It's a never-ending task, as we all know from many of us who work, co-workers to volunteer organizations or anything. So I can just imagine the massive undertaking it is, because as you're talking from farm to table, you're talking shipping, you're talking storage, you're talking processing, and at any step along the way, there's the risk. If you're looking at it from a terrorism standpoint, there's the risk for tampering and for, going back even before that. We all remember, well, anybody in my age group remembers the Tylenol scare.
Tylenol in Chicago, yes.
Yes,
exactly.
and so a lot of the packaging, even this morning I put on my contact lenses, and the saline solution was wrapped in this thing, and it took me, I was a little late getting here to the studio because I was trying to get this packaging off, and the joke is always that child protective packaging only benefits the adult who has a child to get it off for them. For the rest of us whose children are still sleeping, it becomes tough.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad I'm not the only person that has a hard time opening up packages.
Well, I will say that maybe at the behest of the Food and Drug Administration, but the packaging is getting a lot more difficult. So I'm confident that my saline solution is easy, because we also had the Visine scare, and there's many opportunities, and of course, many of these things we talk about, the Tylenol issue, the Visine issue, they were not terrorism related. They were people seeking attention, people who had some mental issues going on that were not allowing them to think clearly, and causing criminal activity not related to terrorism. But that said, they all sort of tie in together, because tampering is tampering. E. coli in one farm setting can spread out, and so you have probably the ability to tag many birds with one stone, but at the same time, you have to cast a lot of rocks, because there's so many different ways to go about this.
I wish I had said that. Nicely put. Nicely put.
Well, as you know, all episodes of Foxborough Central are available at www.fcatv.org. So if you want to steal that tagline, this is your show. You're welcome to it.
I might think about it. Yeah, it's tampering, whether it's on a small level or an international level, with a major organized terrorist threat, is something really to have a historical perspective on. And there have been cases well after the Tylenol scare of the 1980s, where we had a supermarket in Michigan have a low-level terrorist attack, and it's happened periodically all over the country. After the initial terrorist attacks in 2001, we really had to get online and take care of that. And I remember in our email correspondence, you asked me for some of the programs that are in place. And I think the bottom line here is to educate your many intelligent viewers and make them realize that behind the scenes there are things going on to keep their food safe, keep their food and drugs safe. We initiated what we call the ALERT program.
ALERT.
ALERT, A-L-E-R-T, of course. Okay. The acronym has a meaning, and it's a multi-stage program where we ask producers of food, and the food industry is very interesting. It's very big. It's very fast-paced. We did target assessments, vulnerability assessments of many different food industries, and we found out that these major industries, Bob, that make huge batches of food that has to move quickly off the shelf, are really, or were really vulnerable targets. These people are moving quick. They're making a lot of stuff. They aren't looking really closely at security. At least they weren't 10 years ago. They've changed dramatically, and so that was an issue we had to address. So we made sure that the industry assured that the stuff that was coming into the doors to make potato chips, to make canned vegetables, whatever they were producing, was looked at real closely. We wanted them to look at things that came in and have situational awareness, and assure that they knew where their products, their raw materials, their packaging, their containers, their ingredients, where they were coming from.
Interesting.
We wanted them to look at this. And we found that a lot of people weren't looking at this. So goodness knows where it came from and what could have been in it in a negative way as it came through the door.
That's a really interesting and a little bit scary thought, because you hold a Twinkie in your hand, but where did the materials come from to make the Twinkie?
Exactly.
And who's regulating from the farm to the factory?
Correct.
That's an eye-opening thought.
As you mentioned, many stones had to be thrown out there to hit the right targets. And take that a step further and look at the people that work for the company. That's the L or the E in alert, employees. Mm-hmm. We had to know that the folks hiring these people did the proper vetting. These individuals that they were bringing on had to have background checks. Mm-hmm. They're in a huge, important industry that reaches all of us, impacts dramatically on the health of your family and kids, on the health of everybody, the studio people. We all are impacted by what we eat. If you can't trust your food supply, you get pretty grumpy in a hurry if you're not eating. You really do. So we had to look at the employees. We had to have them vetted and taken care of with background checks. We had to know who moved around major food producing companies. Now, some of these companies didn't have much in place as far as security cameras go. Mm-hmm. I'm not promoting a big brother mentality, but I am promoting.
Well, there is always that push-pull of free market economy and highly regulated food sources become a safe food supply.
Sure.
That's a interesting push-pull.
It is, and I know that you're also a print journalist, which is just one of the basic premises of how we get our information out.
Well, many people at home might call me just a print hacker, but we'll see where we go with it.
I respect that. I do. That's important. So you had to sort of balance that out. Security cameras do become part of the equation. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are places in certain production houses where not everybody needs to be. So we had to do some more monitoring, upgrading, and updating the way that the management looked at their employers, the employees, their roles, and where they stood literally in the company. So that had to be enhanced a great deal.
That's a very interesting thought, because many industries have high security, obviously intelligence, but I work at a bank and we have many security procedures in place to ensure restriction of access, ability to monitor, and a lot of the controls we have in place are the behest of federal government regulations due in response to certain acts, world crossing, any type of fraud issue. And so we're talking about a response to the 9/11, which is what the genesis of our topic is here. And so what exactly is the Bioterrorism Act of 2002?
Well, it pointed out, and I brought some notes here because there are so many bullet points floating around in these wonderful interviews. It required registration of food facilities. That's where the alert program more or less comes in. Prior notice of shipments of food. In other words, if you're bringing something in from another country, you've got to tell the FDA, USDA, the import people that it's coming in before it gets here.
Okay.
You never know, across the border initiative, you never know what's going to come in and how well overseas security is from the exporting country. So it required that. Also maintenance and inspection records. It's a paper trail. Mm-hmm. We needed to know what the complaint records were at food manufacturing companies, internal reports on safety provisions and safety programs that they initiate on location. So we want to know that. We also have the right to do what we call administrative detention. In other words, if we suspect a food item or a bulk of food items being shipped or produced have been deliberately contaminated, mm-hmm. terrorist act, we can stop them from going anywhere. So those were the four major premises of the Bioterrorism Act. And really, as you mentioned, the real start of upgrading and enhancing the food safety and food defense program in this country. It's been major legislation. We have sent our people out.
I was just going to ask.
Yes.
I'm glad you're going directly where we're going.
We're segueing.
So let's take this bioterrorism, and you're talking about point of origin. And so, I had a glass of apple juice this morning, so let's just take that. And on the bottle it said made from apples from Chile and Argentina. So we have agents in Argentina?
Well, we have people in South America now, which we didn't have before 10, 12 years ago. We have FDA people all over the place. They're either in separate offices, Bob, or they're at the embassies. And it's the Across the Borders initiative, which has gotten our people out, bringing the food defense and food safety message to other countries. I mean, we are like the major recipient of imports from about 89 or 90 countries. We're the big market. So we need to know that those products coming into this country are safe for the American people to consume. We're a multicultural nation, there's no doubt about it, always have been. And people from other countries, even though they were born here, sometimes want that down-home neighborhood food that their grandparents or parents or that they grew up with. So they want to have that.
Well, and then as we become a more aware nation, many of us enjoy new things and trying new things. So with the ability to put agents in other countries, of course, the benefit to them is that they're still allowed to have access to our market. And I am assuming, and I shouldn't, I'm going to ask, but are there penalties for failure to comply, included the Bioterrorism Act? Say, we'll pick country Xanadu, which is importing kumquats. So the Xanadu kumquats come and they forget to notify the FDA that or the company importing forgets to file the paperwork saying that the shipment of kumquats coming in on the Valdez is arriving. And there's no inspectors or no inspection mechanism in place in Xanadu to look at the kumquats before they come in. What could happen to Xanadu or the company in Xanadu that's trying to export?
Well, cut off from the American market. Once again, if we're taking these Xanadu kumquats, we are probably taking a lot of them because we consume a lot of stuff. They lose the American market share because they didn't do the prior notice thing, didn't notify us beforehand.
When you say they the country, or they the business?
Well, probably they the business.
So I guess so. Is there any ownership by the exporting country to regulate their own businesses doing the work that you're trying to do?
If they have a national export registry or department that handles produce going overseas, they would probably have to bring that word down to the pickers and the growers of the kumquats in Xanadu. They would have to do that. If they didn't and they failed to do that, then it would be on the export folks, the agent that works with the growers, to make sure that they understood. By they, I mean that the fruit company understood what the laws and regulations were to import or export to the United States. So it's a multi-level thing. So does it always work in every country? No, you made a good point. Although it's a creative analogy, it doesn't always work. But if you want to come to this country, you've got to do prior notice. You've got to have either your government or, more importantly, the exporting company with the product contact our people to get it into this country. If it doesn't happen, we can't run the risk of a intentionally contaminated, terrorist-related incident happening on the docks or in the markets of America. You can't do it. That's basically how that works. You've got to work with other countries. You've got to have people in place, trained. You've got to understand that food is so important. You've got to look at the employees' credentials, make sure employees who are so important are aware of what's around and how they can deal with it, how they can input on safe food and put a negation on terrorist acts, really.
So, and then I suppose that in the grand scheme of things, nobody wants to export bad produce.
They don't. Usually.
It creates a bad reputation. However, and I'll refer back to the issue some number of years ago where the Chinese government was not regulating paint on children's toys, and there was a lead paint issue. It's amazing where I come up with these things on television.
You read.
But anyway, So, and I believe that probably did that fall under the Food and Drug Administration?
Although
that was
consumer product safety.
Okay, but similar type of thing where it was a government that was not being supportive of a United States regulation.
Right.
If Xanadu were to do something similar and allow, say, fecal matter to be on the kumquats, and that would cause an E. coli breakout, what type of punitive, I'm using the stick and the carrot, what benefit is it to Xanadu, aside from wonderful relations with the United States, to heavily regulate their kumquat industry? And at the same time, what kind of a stick do you have to force Xanadu to either comply or move out?
Import detention. Hold up their product at the docks.
It sits on the dock in a container.
It does until it gets cleared, if it gets cleared.
Or until it starts to smell.
Well, that's been known to happen too. If they can recondition or fix the problem on location or hire people in this country that can do it, then that's an option as well. You can get more or less permanent import detention or restrictions. In other words, you're not allowed, that company or that country, not allowed to do business in the United States. Enforcement's so important. I mean, the real bottom line here, international relationships being what they are, is to protect the consuming public. That's what the FDA does. That's what the folks at the import offices do. U.S. Department of Agriculture does the same thing. That's what part of our mandate is, safe food for the American consumer. So the laws are evident. We go out of our way to publish them. We make sure everybody on an international and national level knows what they are. And it behooves people that want to be in those industries, which is so important for all of us. I think we both agree on that. That you just have to have safe food. There's no alternative to it. It's such a basic premise for existence that you have to trust it. If you don't, it impacts negatively on the whole disposition of a nation. Without safe food, you don't have a real progressive country. You've got problems.
And of course, I'm speaking with Joe Raulinaitis. He is the
Public affairs guy.
Public affairs guy for the Food and Drug Administration, a wonderful guest. And I'm going to put you on the spot right now. So we've been talking about the Bioterrorism Act of 2002 and post 9/11 responses and all sorts of things that came down. Are there any success stories? Is there an example of a time when the FDA was not only on the ball but was able to avert an issue? Or is the success the fact that with all the regulations being put in place, that you've averted things before they become things? And that in itself is, with why I do at work.
Sure.
Bob, everything seems to be going fine. Well, the reason everything's going fine is because we do a heck of a lot of work to make sure things are going fine. So there's no super issue to find because we have controls, procedures, standard operating procedures, training, everything in place to make sure that nothing goes wrong. So is that the success?
That's a great question, and it requires me to probably take a sip of coffee and think it through. I don't know.
Well, I gave you 30 seconds to take a sip of coffee. I was asking.
I could. Well, every morning when I tag into my computer, go in the office, and I look up the import detentions and recalls, I realize that indicates success for the program because a lot of those import detentions are food substances from elsewhere and recalls from internal food production. So it's not that things are still not going wrong in these huge industries, because they are. I do believe honestly that we're catching a lot of them. But to fall back on what you said earlier about the painted children's toys from China, a while after that in 2007 we had the melamine, which is that industrial item in the pet food, which killed a lot of the pets. It did. So that was a situation where we had the evolution of the Bioterrorism Act and the alert program and employees first and everything like that, but we still had a major problem with an import from China. They handled it a lot differently in that country, very, very harsh. We weren't happy here, and there was all sorts of a movement and legal action on all levels on that. It's an evolutionary process.
When you say something like that, I'm going to ask, what happened?
Well, it just got through. They, on the China side of the house, they were not looking really closely at their product. We did not have I don't believe we didn't have an office in China because that was opened up shortly after by a good friend of mine, a guy named Mike Kravchuk, went over there, I think in 2008, and hoped to open up the office in Beijing. It was probably on the boards anyways, but it was just a matter of timing. So it's not a perfect world, unfortunately, but your viewers, our people in Foxborough, and wherever this program is seen, can be really sure that the food supply is looked at very close. The programs are in place, and it's this very safe and sophisticated food supply. It really is.
I was just going to pull my John McLaughlin act and say, America's food supply, is it safe? Go.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It pretty much is. I mean, it doesn't mean that people don't make mistakes, that incidents don't happen. We try to minimize that. We plan, we have response, and we have recovery as being the mandates for the way we look at the food supply. But it's good to ask these questions. It's good to get your viewers thinking about this, thinking about what happens behind the scenes before they pour the morning cornflakes or Cheerios and milk, and realize there's a lot of moving parts there. I know that's cliche, but there are.
Well, let's talk about my morning cornflakes. So I pour my morning cornflakes, and there's a little section there that says complaints or issues, call, whatever. So is that the first step if there's an issue with food? Does that bubble up somehow to a reporting mechanism? Or do you have to contact the Food and Drug Administration directly and say, hey, I found this?
Sure. You can call the company, and the company is apologetic and sincere.
Or in the third part, or is most of your reporting coming from hospitals looking at bubbles or spikes and reportable illnesses or a certain type of issue?
We've had those. We have the MedWatch report for devices and drugs, but we have a consumer complaint coordinator, and I don't have her phone number here. Sheila Van Twyver up in Stoneham, which is our central office in the district in New England.
But with the magic of television, you'll see it right here on the screen. So there you go.
So you can call the complaint office and file the complaint. We advocate that. There are 13,000 people that work for the FDA. We have a population in this country of well over 300 million now. We need to hear from consumers. If you have a problem with your cornflakes, Bob, in the morning, you need to call us up and tell it. So in most cases, it's not terrorism. It's just a bad production program or whatever the case might be. But we still need to know. We'd like to hear from people. We take every complaint seriously. It could lead to a far bigger investigation. It could lead to a problem with a product that needs to be corrected. So hearing from your viewers, who are my consumers, is really an important thing.
Well, not to borrow from another agency's tagline, the TSA, if you hear something, see something, say something, I suppose the same applies.
Yeah. I mean,
because safety is not only a physical issue, but it can be a food issue, it can be a water issue.
It is. And in a democracy, communication is so important, and sharing information. I mean, that's what makes this show so great, is we share information. We get a point across. It doesn't always make people real comfortable, but it's an important point.
Well, I love sharing information, and I love having these types of conversations, but time flies. We only have 1 minute left. Mr. Raulinaitis, what is the last word on the Food and Drug Administration, and what are you doing to save ourselves from ourselves?
Well, we're promoting education, in the schools, in the industries that we work with. We have pretty educated staff of people that go out and bring the alert and food safety and food defense message right out to the industries. And the bottom line is that this is an evolutionary process. We've been doing it for a long time now, and it's working out pretty good. I'm real happy with it.
Mr. Raulinaitis, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to come out here. And of course, all the good stuff from the Food and Drug Administration is at www.fda.gov.
It is.
And they can also call your office, the number on the screen. And if nothing else, you can always check us out on www.fcatv.org, where all your fantastic episodes of Foxborough Central are stored for your viewing pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Food and Drug Administration and what they're doing to protect our food supply, water supply, and bioterrorism issues. Bob Hickey, your host. Thanks to the volunteers who make this show possible. Betty Travers, Deb Storrs behind the camera, Gary Nash behind the glass, Michael Weber, our executive director, and Rob, who does such a great job editing the stuff. Bob Hickey, have a great day, Foxborough.